Have you ever noticed that stretching feels really good, but within minutes or hours, you're stiff again? That's because stretching only addresses the symptom of stiffness, but it doesn't fix the underlying cause. In this video, I'll explain why you really get muscle stiffness, plus share my 3-step system to lasting flexibility. Then I'll explain how to apply that system to 3 commonly stiff muscle groups: your hamstrings, your hip flexors, and your upper trapezius. So let's get started. But first, why do your muscles get stiff in the first place? Well, stretching your muscles isn't like stretching a rubber band or pulling taffy. Your muscles are living, innervated tissues, and largely flexibility is controlled by your nervous system. One common cause of muscle stiffness is prolonged low-level muscle tension. Research studies have shown that knots or trigger points can start to develop in the upper trapezius after just 1 hour of continuous typing at a computer. Now, the reason this happens is due to something called the Henneman's size principle. What that principle says is that you recruit motor units from smallest to largest. So with low-level sustained postural tasks, such as typing at a computer, you use small motor units that can work for a long period of time, but not at a very high load. However, when you're using those same motor units over and over and over for a long period of time, such as typing, then you develop knots or trigger points when those muscles start to fatigue or run out of oxygen. Now, that can be particularly problematic when combined with your muscles being in a shortened position. That's what often happens with the hip flexors. Your hip flexors or your iliopsoas attach to your lower back and your pelvis, and then the other end attaches down to your thigh bone. Now, when you're sitting at a 90-degree angle like this, the muscle is in a shortened position, and when you stay that way for a long period of time, then you have a hard time lengthening it, especially if you're sitting without back support or if you're using your hip flexors as a postural muscle. Again, those smaller motor units get recruited, and if you do that for a long period of time, you start developing knots or trigger points. And then when that muscle is shortened with those knots or trigger points and you go to stand up, it makes it hard to stand upright and start to walk. So low-level sustained loads and muscles being shortened for a long period of time are 2 large causes of muscle stiffness. Now, another thing that can cause muscle stiffness is never getting the muscle to its end range. That commonly happens with your hamstrings. For example, when you're walking, largely your hamstrings are in the mid-range throughout the time that you're walking. And it's actually pretty rare during the course of the day that we get our hamstrings all the way in the lengthened position. Only perhaps when you bend down to pick something up. And many people will bend their knees anyway, which means for a large number of people, they never get their hamstrings into a fully lengthened position, which is why a lot of people have stiff hamstrings. Now, a final reason why you may develop knots or trigger points is to protect you from injury. For example, if your brain doesn't feel like you're strong enough in your hamstrings to get you back out of this position or prevent your sciatic nerve from being overstretched when you're bent down in that position, then it'll reflexively tighten up those hamstrings so you don't injure something. The same thing can happen with your upper trapezius. If you're in a shoulder depressed position like that for a long period of time, in order to avoid overstretching the bundle of nerves called your brachial plexus right here, your brain can tighten the muscle up to help protect your nerves. So your brain uses muscle stiffness to protect you from injury. So how do you fix muscle stiffness? Well, if we know that's caused by the nervous system, we can use some simple tricks to trick your nervous system into allowing that new range of motion. The 3 techniques that I'll use in this video are PNF techniques, or proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation, or in many cases, inhibition, meaning it calms the muscle down rather than turns the muscle up. The 3 techniques we'll use are autogenic inhibition, reciprocal inhibition, and slow eccentrics. I know that's a mouthful, so it'll probably make a little more sense if we just dive into the first exercise, and I'll explain them as I go along. First, for your hamstrings. Your hamstrings are a hip extensor and a knee flexor. So to stretch them, you'd go into just the opposite motion, hip flexion and knee extension. For the first part of the stretch, we'll do a contract relax stretch. This uses a principle known as autogenic inhibition. So we'll put the strap around the foot like this and bring it up into the air to pull the hamstrings into a stretch position. Now we're going to contract the hamstrings by pushing against the strap, trying to pull the leg down towards the floor like that while providing resistance with your arms. So pushing down that way, holding for 5 seconds, and then relax, and then pull up a little farther. And then repeat that 5 times. Push and hold for 5 seconds, pull a little farther, push and hold for 5 seconds, pull a little farther. Now just go to the point where you can comfortably. Don't go to the point where you're feeling a really bothersome or intense stretch. So we'll pull one more time and then relax. Now for the second part, we're going to do a hold relax. This uses a different neurological principle known as reciprocal inhibition. What that means is that we're going to contract the opposing muscle, so the hip flexors and knee extensors in this case, to hold the leg in the stretch position. When you contract the muscles on the front of your thigh, the muscles in the back of the thigh relax. That's in order to prevent injury. So you're going to hold and then pull up a little farther and try to hold that position, pull up a little farther. You don't have to let go of the strap. I'm just letting go to show that I'm using my muscles to hold it there, not using my hands to hold it there. So then you'll repeat that part 5 times as well. You'll do that for both legs, but for brevity, I'm just going to skip the other side and we'll move to part 3, and this is eccentric strengthening. This means you're going to strengthen the muscle through a lengthened position. So for this, I'm going to use dumbbells, and we're going to be doing a Romanian deadlift. To do this, you'll push the hips backwards, slowly lower so the hamstrings are contracting as they're lengthening, and then you'll push your hips back forward using the hamstrings to bring you back up. And slowly lower down, ideally at least 4 seconds, as many as 7, and then come back up. Slowly lower and back up, and repeat that for 10 repetitions. So you have 5 repetitions of part 1, 5 repetitions of part 2, and then 10 repetitions of part 3. Next, we'll move to the hip flexors. So these muscles do this action, hip flexion, and they get stiff when you're sitting with your thigh in a shortened position for a prolonged period of time. So for part 1, we're going to do a stretch where we use the autogenic inhibition principle where the muscle inhibits itself. So again, we'll use a stretching strap. I'm going to put this around my ankle this time. So put it like that. And then I'm going to lie on my belly and bring the leg up this way. Now you can absolutely do this lying on a bed if you don't want to get down on the floor. But you pull up this way, this stretches your quadricep, and then also try to lift your knee just slightly off the floor. Now note you don't want to cause a lot of back extension when doing this. So just lift the knee slightly off the floor. Now pull the knee back down towards the floor. So you're trying to pull down that way while resisting with your hands. Pull the knee down towards the floor, hold for 5 seconds, and then pull up a little farther. Pull the knee down towards the floor, hold for 5 seconds, pull up a little farther, pull the knee down towards the floor, hold for 5 seconds, and then pull up a little farther. Now we're going to do the hold relax. So we're going to activate the hip extensors, the glutes in this case, and try to keep that position right there using the glutes and to some extent hamstrings. Hold that for 5 seconds, then pull up a little farther. And again, use the muscles to hold the leg up, hold for 5 seconds, pull a little farther, activate the glutes to hold the leg up, hold for 5 seconds, and then pull a little farther. And then one more time, we'll hold for 5 seconds, and then pull a little farther. Now we want to do an eccentric strengthening exercise for the hip flexors. For this, you'll attach an exercise band to a heavy piece of furniture, something that won't slide, and you want to use a fairly heavy resistance band. This shouldn't be something that you can move easily. So now you'll go back into a hip extension position, and you're not going to be kicking out back and forth like this. There shouldn't be a lot of slack in the band. It should actually be pulling you back into that hip extension position. You're going to load your weight over the front leg, bring this one up just to about equal with the other one, and then slowly resist it pulling you back. Bring it up forward to the other one, and then slowly resist it pulling you back. So the band is pulling you back into hip extension. You're using your hip flexors to resist that hip extension slowly. And note, you should be struggling just a little bit when doing this. If you do have to hold on to something for balance, that's perfectly okay as well. Next, we'll move to the upper trapezius. For this one, it does help to sit down so that you can hold on to a chair with the side that you're stretching. Then take your other hand and put it up over top of your head. Then you're just going to gently pull. You don't want to overstretch this muscle. So just feel a gentle stretch there, and then give a little pressure, pushing your head back into your hand. Again, this uses the autogenic inhibition principle. The muscle inhibits itself, and then you pull a little bit farther. Push and hold gently for 5 seconds, and then pull a little farther. Push and hold gently for 5 seconds, pull a little farther, and then one more time, push and hold, and then pull a little farther. Now you're just going to let pressure off here. Use the muscles on this side to help tip your head a little farther. Again, just go till you feel a little bit of a stretch there. Hold 5 seconds, and then relax. Pull a little farther, hold 5 seconds, then relax. Pull a little farther, hold 5 seconds, and relax. Now for the eccentric strengthening part, we're going to do a shoulder shrug with a slow lower. To do that, you'll grab a pair of dumbbells. You're going to shrug your shoulders up as high as you can go, and then slowly lower the dumbbells down to your sides, thinking about allowing them to go as far to the floor as possible. Then raise up, shrug your shoulders up towards your ears, slowly lower down, going as far down towards the floor as possible, and then shrug up, and then slowly lower down, and repeat that for 10 repetitions. Now, those were just 3 examples of how to apply the principles. But really, you can apply those same principles to most muscle groups in your body. To learn more ways to improve your flexibility, check out this video over here. But before you go, if you found this one helpful, make sure to give it a like. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel so you get notified of my future tips. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.